Okay, it's Robert Andrews from paidContent here at London Calling with Feargal Sharkey, ex of the Undertones and now Chief Executive of British Music Rights. Feargal, BMR released some very interesting research with the University of Hertfordshire this week that showed teenagers are getting their kicks from free music, if you like, so that half of tracks on teenagers' iPods are actually not being paid for.
Yeah.
What's the upshot of the research that you produced?
All of the stuff, and for me it's the first stage in dealing with any issue in your life, is actually trying to get a real detailed understanding of what the issue is in the first place. I think it certainly provides that. And yes, it does perhaps be a little bit unsettling for some people when you realise that the average 14 to 25-year-old, half of the music in their iPod is not being paid for. There is, however, as the report then develops, it does explain that there is actually huge optimism out there, and that these young people are more engaged with music than at any point in anybody's life. It means more to them than things like mobile phones, films, sports, games. We ask the classic desert island question. We're going to take everything away from you apart from one thing that is more important to you than oxygen itself. What would be that one thing? And to give you an idea, music peaks up at about 78-79%, and things like video games and games consoles scrapes along the bottom about 22-23%. So it is a huge part of their lives. They then clearly send a message back to the industry. They do want to consume music, they do want to do it legitimately, and they are willing to pay quite a lot of money for it. So it's really now the challenge, and in many ways perhaps thrown down a gauntlet to the industry. We perhaps need to look at the way we've been trying to reach these young people, we've been delivering music to them, and perhaps we need to think about how we move forward and how we progress. And I suspect if the music industry is bold enough to do it, the potential that exists out there can be quite extraordinary.
The survey respondents may have said they will be willing to pay for the music, but
Sure.
Nevertheless, a significant proportion of them right now aren't, and they are both.
In terms of that section of the survey, it would be 100% of them that aren't.
And so a lot of them are downloading from P2P networks.
Yeah.
And also uploading as well. So what's the answer to all this?
I think the ultimate answer is probably going to be a little bit of a stick and a little bit of a carrot. Quite clearly they tell us that one of the reasons they're doing it is that they don't think anybody's ever going to notice. Where a comparable bit of research done by, I think it was the BPI a couple of months back, again was quite clearly saying that actually nothing more than one single letter, for example, from an ISP to go, well actually somebody has noticed what you're doing and now would you please stop it. But I think personally we need to combine that kind of approach potentially with, by the way, here is a legitimate service that your ISP or someone else can offer you to get you engaged with that. When we did, for example, begin to explore the morality question with some of them, they are acutely aware that what they're doing does have an impact on the singers, the songwriters, the artists and the musicians, albeit they hide behind that slightly. But they do know there is an impact, and I think again, it actually gives me an awful lot of optimism. There's a little bit more work there we need to do, there's a little bit more education there that we need to do, but ironically, they do know what they're doing has an impact, and it has an impact in the one and only place where it shouldn't have any impact at all, and that's the artists.
And one of the big answers, the potential answers that's bobbling around right now in policy circles is the 3 strikes and you're out option.
I have to be very clear about something here, because that got tangled up in the announcements surrounding the government's Creative Economy Programme strategy, which was announced at the end of February, beginning of March. I had spent a number of years, myself and Eric Nickley, the then chairman of EMI, working with government on that document. And I knew at 6 o'clock in the morning that it did not say what some people in the media possibly were reporting that it said. In fact, I would possibly even go so far as to suggest that maybe somebody took half of one story and put it together with half of another story and came up with a whole new thing. If you look at that document, there is no mention about 3 strikes and you're out or anything else. What government quite clearly has spelt out, and what they did at the time, was that they are incredibly sensitive to the fact it is a huge issue for the music industry. It is obviously quite clearly having an impact on all kinds of areas, and it is unsustainable. But that the much preferred option right now would be for the music industry and the ISPs to develop a commercial solution, and should that not be achieved by April the 1st, 2009, then government will legislate to do something.
And so one of the first efforts we've seen at that is the BPI and Virgin collaborating to send out letters. This seems to be like a softly approach. What if that doesn't work?
Well, it's I think for me the significance of it's the first step on a process, and it's the first step of a process beginning to hopefully build trust between these two industries. And let's face it, over the last 10 years or whatever, there has been anything but trust and confidence in each other. So I'm hoping that it will be the first steps in what will become a very long, very successful partnership.
And if I heard you correctly in the previous session here at London Calling, you are an advocate of introducing the so-called iPod tax, the levy on copying hardware that most other countries in Europe have.
In actual fact, there's nothing tax about it whatsoever. Let me ask you a question. Do you have an MPEG-3 player?
Yes.
In which case, you're blissfully unaware of the fact you are already part of a licensing scheme where the manufacturer of that MPEG-3 player had to pay $2 for your device back to the organisation that owns the software rights for MPEG encoders and decoders. Now, is that a tax? Is that a levy? Because what we're proposing is exactly the same kind of licensing scheme. And ironically enough, and it's one of the things I find fascinating in this whole debate, the organisation that licenses manufacturers to produce MPEG players has now licensed about 300 million individual devices around the world at the cost of $2 each. So they've generated $600 million worth of business. But 83% of 14 to 25-year-olds are telling us the only reason they bought an MPEG-3 player was to play music on it. And guess who has not seen one single penny from that $600 million? That's the artists and the creators who actually created the music that made the whole thing happen in the first place. And I think everybody needs to ask themselves a rhetorical question. Do they not have some right in some way to share from all the benefit that has generated?
And so are you talking about going to Steve Jobs and saying, hey Steve, won't you give us a small percentage of all the revenue you make from iPods, iPhones?
What the deal we're proposing to government is that, yes, we would sit down and have a normal commercial negotiation with Steve Jobs or whoever that might be, and that to ensure comfort back to government that this approval for the whole scheme would lie with government, so that they feel they can have some sort of control over it and some sort of influence in it. But I'll repeat what I just said. You as a consumer have already been part of exactly the kind of licensing scheme we're proposing, and you weren't even aware of it.
Okay, finally, how optimistic are you that the downward trend right now can be reversed for the British music industry?
Listen, it simply has to be. Because the reality is, if we don't reverse it, well, who's going to make music? And what would our lives be without music? It would be an extraordinarily dull, less interesting place to be.
Okay, Feargal, thanks.
You're well welcome.